Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Yes, we have an exciting guest that we are joined with. I'm going to be interviewing, who's Rachel Wentzel. She's the Director of Global Marketing Procurement for Creative and Production at Adidas. So she's going to introduce herself shortly, but just to kind of give those of you who sort of haven't joined one of these sessions before, BD Matters is a business development community for BD enthusiasts. It's for entrepreneurs, procurement professionals, any marketing people that sort of contribute to the growth of their business and their sales funnel. And we host these kind of interviews at the first Wednesday of every month at 12 o'clock. They're live, they're recorded. If you want to see any of the previous recordings, they're only available for paying members. So if you did want to look at BD Matters membership, I'll be happy to chat to you guys afterwards. But if you wanted to put all of the interviews in your diary, I'm going to put a link in the chat, which is that one. So if you download that link, that will just put the first Wednesday of every month at 12 o'clock into your diary, so you don't miss any of the ones coming up. They're all free to attend live. And that's about it. So today we're going to be talking to Rachel about some of the industry trends, some of the insight, what's going on at Adidas, content at scale, and how agencies can better work with and build relationships with procurement, and also like what it takes for agencies to sort of be seen by big league brands. So Rachel, do you want to sort of say hi, give a little intro from yourself?
Sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. Thank you, Adam, for having me as your guest as well. So I'm Rachel Wentzel. As Adam mentioned, I'm Director of Global Marketing Procurement for agencies and production at Adidas. I've been there for 8 years. Previous to that, I was at Procter & Gamble for nearly 8 years. So all in all, about 16 years of procurement experience. I studied marketing. So procurement was not where I thought my journey would take me, but here I am. So I studied marketing. I have an MBA from Xavier University from Cincinnati, Ohio, and studied PR and comms in undergrad. So a bit of a weird mix of background and experience, but have really kind of focused in marketing procurement. So happy to be here with you all and answer all your questions that you might have.
Thanks, Rachel. Yeah, and obviously with that in note, if you have got questions, please put them into the chat. We might be able to ask them direct, take you off mute and things like that. But flag them as they go through. We'll do our best to answer them. Cool. So let's get into it. So I noticed obviously recently we talked about your new CEO, Bjorn Gulden, is that right? Probably pronounced incorrect. So just interested obviously to seeing, them come in and what the future of Adidas might look like, under his reign, any changes you've seen or anything he's kind of looking to put in place would be some great to know.
Yeah. So he joined us in the beginning of this year. Big change. So he comes from Puma. He was the previous CEO from Puma. So now he's joined the Adidas family again. He actually worked at Adidas years ago. And I must say, he's brought so much great new energy into the company. He's a very, very positive person. He calls himself a sports romantic. So if you follow him on Instagram, we'll see he's out skiing or running or doing something related to sport every weekend. But I do feel like under his reign and this new change that we're feeling, it's going in a positive direction. Of course, the company hasn't been in the best place the last few years or year or so, if you've read any of the news, but absolutely see positive direction. I think the company will definitely come back to its peak. The first sports brand in the world. We have so much rich history. So I think really under him, positive things will be happening at Adidas.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any insight into sort of why things, did derail then, or what you think? Obviously, the markets are quite, difficult at the moment, but just anything you could add on that?
I mean, just a caveat, it's not that I've been corporate comms approved to speak on behalf of Adidas, so this is Rachel Wentzel's opinion, just to caveat that. But I think, of course, we've all felt so much pressure and challenges around COVID is kind of where all of this started. We still have the war going on in Ukraine, lots of challenges within our Asia-China market. So I think it's just been a bit of a perfect storm. And if I look at our history, we're this tiny little company that was derived out of a little village in Germany that's blown up to this huge international company. So I think just that organic growth, there's been lots of evolution. But I think we're at the right moment with the new CEO to really reevaluate and create a new strategy that's going to help take us into the future.
Yeah, so because you've been with the company like 8 years, you said, right?
8 years,
So
yes.
that's a long time, right? And I think when we last spoke, you talked about how you created this category of production, and also how you decoupled it from creative, which you sort of mentioned like Unilever does. So just can you sort of explain that a little bit, what that means and sort of why that was the decision you took at Adidas?
Yeah. So procurement at Adidas is quite a new function. So it was created about, I'd say 11 or so years ago, and really for marketing procurement started focusing on media and creative agencies, and then continued to expand. So I was hired or recruited by Adidas to come in for the area of advertising production. There was no one from a procurement point of view looking at this space. And so my focus was really not so much on the creative shoots, but on the other areas of production in terms of translation services. It was very fragmented around the globe, looking at adaptations, or we have a huge area of e-com product photography. So how can we better leverage and scale that so that not all of our markets are buying samples and taking pictures and these things. So really looking at big consolidation areas that we could do within the area of production. That said, from a creative shoot standpoint, it depends on the project, I think, of course, but there are many cases that we do have internal teams that shoot. We have an in-house digital agency and they manage all the productions. They're kind of their own creative agency, and then they have a production team that then captures that content. But it depends on how big the shoot is. Of course, we work with a lot of celebrities and athletes that require just a different level of sophistication and orchestration in that production. But we do look at each case by case to see how it best makes sense, whether or not we have a specific production company that we just take the idea from and execute, or if we have it fully coupled together with our creative.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So yes, and is that in-house? Is that a recent development? The in-house studio, is that something that's always been there, or has that grown in recent years?
It's grown. So really, it started launching in early 2020, right before the pandemic happened, and was starting off very small, digital for digital content, but has absolutely grown given, we weren't able to travel or go to set or do all these things. So we had this in-house team that was really able to act agilely, connect. They already know the brand, they're Adidas employees. So getting to the core of the brand was already there. So we've really scaled that team up. We're hiring a bunch of folks out of Portugal right now, if anyone's interested to join the team in Porto. But yeah, so we've really built this, expanding and building this in-house capabilities. Of course, we're not necessarily not doing stuff with externals. We still do tons of work with creative agencies and production companies, but there's this need for digital commercial content that team's responsible for.
And I don't know if you can share, are there any obvious sort of like challenges around the in-house agency? I mean, obviously it's a growing trend. We've seen, as agencies sort of wanting to sort of win work and they're competing against in-house agencies. Are there any obvious times where it makes more sense to work with an external partner? You have to.
Yeah, I think, it depends on the job. We do have, like, our in-house agency, of course, there's cost efficiencies there, and that's why we've built it. So we're really respecting whether or not it's a big creative that we really need that strategy and that external support for, or if we really feel like our in-house team, because we do have a creative team led by a creative director who is also, taking in terms of those individual campaigns. But we're quite fragmented in the sense of we have, our big campaign commercials. And I'm sorry if you can hear this buzzer. I swear I put myself on do not disturb, but it's clearly not working.
Clearly very in demand. I mean, still got
but we have our big brand campaigns, and then we have product campaigns, and then we have commercial campaigns. So it depends on the tier in which we're activating, depends on how we would look at what agencies or production partners or in-housing would make sense.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. So we talked a little bit about advertising to minority ethnicities, right? And I think that's something that Adidas as a business has tried to sort of evolve that offering. What can you tell us about the work in that space?
Yeah. So my previous life, when I was at Procter & Gamble, I was buying ethnic advertising agencies for US Hispanics and African American consumers. Don't know if they're still doing that or how they're set up. That was 8 years ago, so don't want to speak for them. But at the time, particularly because we had product. So if I think about Pantene had a specific shampoo conditioning product for a minority needs. And so there was very much a thing there, where at Adidas, we are always focused on diversity and equity and inclusion. It is in the core and the root of everything we do. So we don't have specific agencies for that kind of execution. But we really do ensure that our agencies, we're working with diverse teams. We're looking at those agencies and how they're set up and making sure that it's in the root. We have like a cultural marketing team to make sure that we're vetting our content, that we're not being exclusive or not including anyone. It really is at the core of what we do. Consumers are at the core of everything, and that is all types of people around the world. Also thinking about, I don't know if you've been on adidas.com lately, you should check it out. We're having our new season launch. So it's Members Week as well, just a little plug. But that we also really do try to have inclusive modeling, whether that's models with disabilities or different colors, shapes, what you name it. It's really at the core of everything we do.
And who drives that from the top? Is that just embedded into every team, like within procurement, or is there like the heads of diversity and inclusion, I presume, people like that in the organization that are driving that?
Yeah, we have, like I said, this like cultural marketing team. So they really, I think they were called brand purpose at one point, but really ensuring, so they sit in marketing and they help vet the content. If we have a commercial that seems like it's one-sided and not inclusive enough, then we'll go back to shoot and make sure that we really are focused on connecting everyone.
Oh, just can everyone make sure they're on mute?
Cultural marketing. Adidas, esta trabaja en Adidas, ¿vale? Es responsable de marketing o algo así de Adidas.
I'm just going to mute Axel. Sorry, Axel. It was lovely it was to hear your conversation. Sorry, Rachel. Yeah. So, with the, obviously in the production world, it's kind of constantly evolving, and we're seeing lots of different things from sort of outsourced, offshoring models, things like that. We're seeing the rise of, ChatGPT and AI technology kind of having a massive influence on all sorts of things, and certainly production. What impacts are you seeing already at Adidas, and do you think it will have on production in the future?
I mean, it's such a hot topic right now. I think all of us are having these conversations, especially when it comes to how to best leverage the technology. We're not, that I'm aware of, digging so much into it right now. What we were looking at and still on our radar is more around the virtual production space, and how to best leverage that. But because our content is so evolving and so flowing with moving content, it's hard for us right now to figure out the best way to engage in a virtual production kind of setup. But I think especially with ChatGPT and all of this kind of AI futuristic to me, like ways of working, I think it's going to be really interesting in how we manage intellectual property or how we manage the authenticity of that content. I mean, you know, for a few years ago, it was always about fake news, and, you know, trying to make sure that we're really being authentic and tracking that. I think there's going to be a need for people to make sure they have the right teams in place that are evaluating where our content's living, where our brand is showing up and how that's looking. So I can imagine it's maybe going to cause a little bit more headache than good until we get figured out how to best utilize the technology coming our way.
Yeah, the management of that, because I think, we all want to be faster and more efficient. Are you guys, I presume, production is huge at Adidas, must be producing a huge amount of assets constantly. How does production work like globally? Are there sort of production houses locally? And like you talked a little bit about translation and transcreation and things like that. How do you kind of work production in sort of global markets?
So we have kind of two-pronged approach. One is we have a global production team, global creative team that is responsible for the big campaigns. And so what they'll do is go to shoot, make sure that we have the right content, toolkits in place that the markets can extract and utilize for their market needs. But of course, we are seeing a lot of market for market requirements. If I think about like the US, we have Major League Soccer, which global wouldn't create because it's niche for that market, or for women's NBA, or for some of these kind of more niche local to local things, we do have production teams in market as well. But we've established a kind of a centralized adaptation model in which we have one agency that has hubs around the world who help make sure that we're adapting the content to brand guidelines to the right way, and also sharing across. So if Dubai is doing something really amazing, can we share that, say, with our Mexico team, so that we're not duplicating efforts and that we're really repurposing and reusing content. So we have the kind of top layer and the bottom layer, but of course we're always trying to do more with less. I think that's a theme for all of us. And, figuring out how do we best leverage the great content that's there versus other teams just kind of recreating things that might already exist. So we focus a lot on asset management solutions, making sure that the teams are informed and connected as well.
And on production, when we last spoke, you talked to me a little bit about music, actually, and we talked. We talked about how it's sort of being overlooked, and I know a lot of agencies, like whether there's something branding agencies or agencies that sort of specialize in that space. So when it comes to content creation of music, what are you seeing? Why do you think it's being overlooked, and what's the sort of opportunities there?
I mean, I'm just such a music lover, so I feel like maybe it's just like a passion point of mine, but I feel like we tend to, of course, look at the creative. We have agencies of record. If you are on client side, I'm sure you do as well, but we don't necessarily have music agencies of record. And I feel like if music was brought up into the creative strategy and the decision making, then it could have such a more meaningful impact versus waiting to the last minute. Perhaps at that point as well, when it comes through production, smaller budgets then maybe could have been used to really buy the right track to emphasize that piece of content. So I just think it's something that creatives and the teams should really think about and not leave it as an afterthought, because at that point, it's probably, not going to get the love, the attention, the searchability. Like if you're looking for music, that takes some time. I remember right when I joined, I went to an agency and they played the same commercial with two different tracks, and how different it was. And it just always stuck with me of how important the music is. Of course, we're visual creatures, but, sound is also very important to us. So that's why I just think there should be more emphasis on not just finding the right image or the moving content, but to have the right track. And I think Adam and team, we see this more and more with TikTok, right? With the rise of TikTok, music is such a fundamental piece of that experience. So I really, think that music as a primary focus should be considered.
Yeah, I think it's a great shout. And for some brands, I think, like you look at Intel, the sound is one of the most valuable pieces of IP that they have, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what Adidas sounds like, but it's it's just how can you sort of create that? Okay, great. Well, I want to talk a little bit about procurement, which is obviously your domain, and talk about some of the sort of stereotypes of procurement, and try and break those down, because there's often those kind of creatives are emotional. Procurement's all very data solution orientated. How do you sort of think marketing procurement is currently perceived?
I do think that, people hear procurement and get really nervous. Oh God, procurement's joining this meeting, or, the business partners bringing procurement in, usually probably isn't for the best reason sometimes. So perhaps has this negative stigma around it. I think procurement, our role is to be neutral and to come with facts. That is the role that we play, where the agencies and the comms teams, they partner daily, they work so close. Sometimes it gets emotional, we're humans, right? So I think from a procurement perspective, I try to come in fact-based, without emotion, without a perspective, not on the agency side. I'm not on necessarily the comms person side. I'm just an unbiased party trying to drive the best business results for my company. So I think the perception can be maybe cold, but we're humans. I have a marketing degree as well. Just because I'm in procurement doesn't mean that I don't have, any knowledge about agencies or marketing or anything. But I do think that depends on the people that you've worked with. But I think it's really all about relationships, building credibility, building trust, and just having honest, fact-based conversations. The end of the day, we're all in business to make money. So I think we just need to be honest and transparent and have those conversations with each other.
Yeah, I think, and I think a platform like this is a great opportunity for you to prove that you are human to start with. And just understand the role of procurement. And I think obviously you've been there 8 years. So how are you sort of trying to change the role of procurement, maybe sort of within Adidas, and I presume, as well as educating agencies, there's probably a role internally to educate as well.
Yeah, it hasn't been easy. Like I said, procurement's just when I joined, especially, it was such a new function, and my role was brand new. So really, I had to build trust with these people. And what I've done is really listen to my business partners and understand their pain points and challenges, and try to remove obstacles from them. I'm not here to make anyone's life more difficult. Of course, we are responsible for maintaining compliance, and of course, we have savings targets and all those things that come along with being in procurement. But really, it's business partnering and understanding their challenges, the issues that they're facing, and then building strategies to help improve that.
And so when you sort of, I'm sure you've been involved in lots of sort of agency reviews or pitches and things like that. How can brands like Adidas be more understanding and empathetic of some of the pressures that agencies are going through? And often about they're having to sort of give away work for free, or they're being crushed down on price, or there's maybe a lack of transparency. Not saying Adidas, but certainly other brands. There is some poor ethics around pitching, which is why the IPA and ISBA launched the whole Pitch Positive pledge recently. So how is there can there be more understanding from the brand side?
Yeah, I mean, so I've just taken over creative since October, still building those relationships with many of our creative agencies, but coming in is just, I was trying not to have an opinion one way or another, but really understand, okay, where are we in terms of the relationship? How long have we been working together? What are the challenges on both sides of the relationship with the comms teams and with the agency? But really understanding where that agency, like you said, the challenges that they're facing as well. I mean, we've all really felt inflation the last months, and there's been scarcity of talent, and agencies need to keep those people paid, and all of these things, and of course those costs do get transitioned to the client. So I think it's a mix of really understanding and having those honest discussions, but depends on the relationship. I think it's not that we don't want to pay big markups like we used to have or any of these things, but I think there's also a balance as to how can we be more efficient and not just waste hours for hours, but really making sure that we're focused on getting great work done together. And that's all about collaboration and communication.
And yeah, maybe agencies need to be leading with more efficiency at this time, particularly. I suppose, like, thinking about the relationships that agencies could build with you, then, like, what advice would you give to an agency looking to build a relationship with procurement? What would be of interest to you to sort of hear?
I think it's about bringing them in to to those conversations, to the table with the comms person. Of course, that's on me as well to make sure that my business partners are looping me in. But I also think that the agencies can engage procurement, make sure that we're there, we're understanding them. We can, like I said, I don't sit on either side in a way. I try to sit fact-based. So the more information that I can be armed with, the better the conversations I can have either internally or with the agency themselves. So it's really about building the relationships. I mean, I think in marketing, that's the core of everything, is building trust and building relationships. So it would be no different for the agency to do that with their comms person versus their procurement contact.
Yeah, I think that, yeah, exactly. It's just trying to break down these barriers and think about what you might want to hear from these agencies as a procurement person. I mean, I know a lot of agencies have sort of been looking at their whole sort of diversity and inclusion and their approach to sustainability. Some have entirely sort of positioned their businesses within that space to sort of just only work with sort of maybe purpose-driven brands or brands that are sort of big advocates in that area. Is that, like, how important a factor is that for Adidas when reviewing agencies right now? And how do you think agencies can demonstrate their values? Like, what do they actually, what should they be doing?
Yeah, I mean, of course, I maintain a roster of agencies. We're always looking at different factors, different dimensions of what sets people apart. What is their unique selling proposition? And I think it is more and more important to ensure that DEI is considered, as well as sustainability. I mean, it's such a focus of my company. So we do look at it. Of course, if the prices are insanely high, or, if the creative just isn't there, you can have the certificate that's not really going to make or break, but it is an additional factor that I think, just as we're living in this world now, thinking about, and how are our teams structured, and especially if our consumer audience is so diverse, we need diverse thinking, we need diverse teams. So I think it's important if you're not, meeting with your procurement person or having at least annual connects of, hey, here's our updated creds, here are the things that we're working on, here's our focus on DEI, this is what we're doing in terms of sustainability. I think it's really important for the procurement colleagues as well as your comms teams to be aware of what you're focusing on and how you're driving targets and moving towards more diverse teams.
And are you seeing things like, B Corp certifications, and I've seen people with like carbon calculators on their website, things like that. Is that getting on your radar? Is you seeing that too?
A little. I mean, I'm not going to lie, I kind of sit at a 50,000 foot view. So I'm not really I work with our few big top agencies. So I'm sure lots of our partners do have this. It's not something I'm personally weekly checking or going out and seeking. But I do think it's important to really consider. And as we're reviewing our roster, it will be like I said, a dimension that we'll look at. And I think it's important. Like, one of the things I feel like agencies don't do well is, like you were saying, Adam, people like agencies are kind of giving work away for free sometimes, regarding if that's a pitch or not, or you're leaning in, you're maybe cutting your rates back because you want to do a really cool project. That messaging and that, like, what you're doing doesn't always come to procurement. We're not necessarily aware of it. Maybe your comms teams are, but they don't really understand the impact. So I think it's really important for agencies to showcase all of the investment that is being made on that client account. Because I don't think the agencies do enough selling of themselves, of all this great work that is being provided to the client.
So, like, in terms of where the budgets are being spent, like, are you talking about transparency around where the investment is going?
Exactly. Like, I mean, for example, I know we have agencies who always tell me, like, Rachel, if my rates aren't at benchmark, let me know, or, this rate might be a little higher. But of course, if there's a project that we want to work on, we're going to reduce the rates. We're going to figure out solutions. But that value is really never translated into a number. We kind of know it's happening, but it's not necessarily showcased. Or we'll have a production studio who will buy lighting for us. Had no idea. So I think it's really important that those things are communicated, whether it's to your comms person or to your procurement person, because when we're evaluating rosters or we're, having conversations with our leadership, these are great success stories that we can highlight about how great the agency is.
And so on that, like, pricing area, I think that's something agencies always, they always ask me about, and they struggle with, in terms of how should they be pricing themselves. They don't want to get stuck into commoditization, but I understand that you need to sort of review things on a level playing field. But how do you see agencies sort of pricing themselves and communicating their sort of value to you?
We typically work on rate card. So of course, procurement, most of your procurement colleagues, they'll have a benchmark tool that they'll use with different rates that they'll compare. The thing is, I've been around long enough to know, I mean, you could give me the cheapest rate, but just kill and burn hours. It's not gonna, just because it looks nice on paper doesn't mean that the actual end result is going to be any different. So I do think it goes back to the efficiency thing. I wouldn't underrate or underprice your rate card to try to be competitive, but I would focus on, look, my rate is this because the talent requires that rate, but we are efficient and effective and not overburning hours. So ultimately the price is going to be competitive. And I think I also don't want the agencies to sell themselves short. If the talent does warrant those large hourly rates, then that's actually probably why they're coming to you in the first place, because you have that ECD with all of the awards and recognition. So I wouldn't undervalue your talent, but I would focus on making sure that you're not burning hours, or you're not, adding hours in areas that maybe they don't. If you think about working versus non-working, MWB, how are you balancing like management staff versus actual doers? So I think that's how I would look at it.
Yeah. And I guess it's that sort of transparency of sort of reporting back around, and also how agencies can be creative about finding value, like you talked about repurposing and things like that. I don't see many agencies actually pitch things like that about how they can be more efficient or help a business be more efficient and smart about, you know, the way they operate. So yeah, there's an opportunity there. I mean, Blair Enns, I don't know if you know Blair Enns, but he wrote sort of Pitch with Win Without Pitching, a book, sort of a business book in the US. He talks about innovation and efficiency and those things being sort of mutually exclusive. You know, can agencies be both? You know, can you be innovative and efficient? You know, and are you aware of that sort of trade-off?
Yeah. Would you mind elaborating just a little bit more? I don't know, for the audience as well, if they're familiar with him, on like what his theory is.
Well, I mean, Blair has an entire sort of book around sort of Win Without Pitching, which is about sort of building your brand up and getting yourself in front of a decision maker and winning sort of before you get into the room. But he also talks a lot about value-based pricing and demonstrating your value. So kind of veering away from the rate card, right? And that's not something that he wants to do. It's like, well, if it's this valuable to Adidas, then this is the value of it. But obviously, that's very hard to do when, you know, procurement individuals and people are obviously measuring on rate card. So I don't know. I just was wondering if there was something in that, or things that you've seen on your side, you know, where agencies have maybe priced themselves creatively, or they've used like sort of performance related pay, things like that, to demonstrate their value. Is that something you come across?
It's not something that I mean, there have been talks, and I know that my China colleagues are really focused on performance-based payment. I think it's hard at this point. We were working with one agency on potential like rebate, earn back incentive type things, but it's very hard to measure. And I think you need to be at a certain point of sophistication to really train the comms teams to have valuable feedback and to score, like, you know, I think there's such an opportunity for people to be trained on giving feedback and to have open and transparent conversations. Especially when it comes to performance, but how are you rating this? How is the organization aware of the impact that score is going to have on financials?
Yeah.
So it's not an area that we're digging into at the moment. But I also, I think back to your point of an innovation and efficiency, it's like, we're always looking for this. Like, this is what sets an agency apart. It's when an agency comes to the brand team or to procurement and says, this is how, you know, this is the tech we're bringing in so that we can get you that real-time dashboard, or this is what we're doing as a company to reduce time and touches. I mean, this is, if an agency comes to me and I can see that they're looking at Adidas as, I'm going to bring you first, all of this tech, this innovation, for me, that is such a huge selling proposition that we have that partnership. So I would encourage you to go to your clients and showcase, you know, how can you drive efficiencies with them in their process? How can you help them brief better? I know this is a pain point all agencies have, is how clients brief them. So investing in maybe doing a workshop or a training with some of their key comms team. I mean, any of this, it's not necessarily innovation, but any of these things drive efficiencies and speed. Because on the client side, I mean, we have tons of projects, so much pressure, lots of change as well. So I think having an agency that's truly seen as a partner goes leaps and bounds.
And I wanted to sort of get into that a little bit, and it's a broad question in terms of like what Adidas look for in a creative partner. Obviously, some of those things you sort of mentioned there, but is there, you know, I don't know if you look at sort of valuation criteria and things like that, but what do you think that would draw Adidas to an agency?
I mean, definitely enrooted in culture and community. This is something that we look at a lot. You know, how the agency understands maybe that local market that would be unique to you, or the creative talent, of course, past work, we always evaluate. I think for our comms teams is really on that kind of chemistry sessions as well. Do we feel like this is an agency that we can trust and really lean on, that will understand our brand, understand our challenges? And then it tends to be procurement, rate card negotiations, contract negotiations at the very end. But it's really highlighting and showcasing your work. I think, Adam, this is a great platform for people to get together, to talk about work that you're doing. I don't know how you're on here or what that competitiveness is, but there's different industry connections that you can really showcase the work that you're doing. I mean, Adam, we talked about Cannes a little bit in our last conversation and how we feel about that or not, but I do think really highlighting and showcasing your work as much as possible, just being visible, is definitely probably the best way for a company like Adidas to be aware of who you are and what you're capable of.
Yeah. And sometimes I find agencies are a little bit humble and a bit shy in that. So it doesn't help. But yeah, we talked a bit about awards, didn't we? And are they worth it? Are they not? So we sort of sat on the fence a little bit with that. I think a lot of people debate whether awards are worth it. And I think you actually came up, we were talking about like internal awards, like for Adidas to sort of give out awards to their agency partners, and maybe that's a better award system than an independent, profit organization just sort of charging for awards.
Exactly. I mean, we haven't kicked it off yet. It is a little idea that I have. So I'm hoping, like I said, just taking over agencies in October. So still working through the landscape, but I remember at Procter & Gamble, they did agency awards or supplier awards, and was always just a nice, like, celebratory event where people could showcase and highlight the work that they were doing. So I definitely think I would love to implement something like that, but I don't know. Be curious to hear if any of your clients do something like that, or if there's a company that does it well. Be curious to see.
Yeah. Also, if anyone's got any questions, we've got about 15 minutes left, so do jump into the chat or just flag to me if there's something you want to ask Rachel. Do you celebrate anything with your agency partners? Is there anything you do, like when they do great work? Is there anything in place?
Yeah, I mean, not really, not official, to be honest. Sometimes some dinners or something, or lunches when they're in town to show, like, highlight the success of a completion of a campaign or a project. I'm sure my comms friends are out partying with them. I'm just maybe not invited because I'm procurement, but I don't know.
do some of that more internal PR needs around the procurement side. And like in terms of like with the pitch positive pledge, one of the sort of the key things around sort of bringing more ethics into pitching is actually trying to avoid pitching in the first place. So I'm just interested in that, in terms of, like, I'm sure you do agency relationship reviews of sort of how things are going and everything, but like, how can an agency avoid a pitch altogether? And are there times where it's just statutory and it has to happen?
I think it depends. So actually, I had this conversation with my team this morning. I think it depends on the project. I definitely know for certain areas of the business, if we have a roster in place, we're trying to, and we know that they work well with a business unit or they're the right qualified, we try to directly go with that agency versus pitching for the sake of pitching. This is the direction that we're going in. I think depends on probably maybe the price or how big the ideation needs to be. If we're really looking for various creative ideas, then we will pitch. but we're trying to go, like, if a comms person knows, I worked on this campaign last season, they were excellent, loved working with them, they would be great at executing the next one, then we try to just direct award. But I think it's probably getting your foot in the door to begin with, and then just knocking it out of the park and being a great agency partner that will keep you from perhaps preventing to have, not having to pitch every time.
Mm. And like, do you tend to work as Adidas? Do they work with like lots of specialist agencies, and like on a sort of roster, or you talked about having fewer agencies of record. What's the sort of
we work with the whole gamut. Like we work with very, very boutique agencies to the big, holding company agencies. It depends on the project or what we're looking to come, as the outcome of that initiative. So it really depends. We're trying to clean up roster, of course, from the procurement point of view, it's always how can we consolidate, link and leverage, build the scale with an agency to ultimately get a lower rate. It really varies. But we have lots, and I mean, because we're in so many countries as well, we have lots of various size agencies, depends on the type of work that they're doing.
But there are, I think there might be a lot of smaller agencies sort of on the call today listening in and things like that. There is a chance that smaller agencies, can be sort of seen and work with the likes of Adidas. I mean, what would sort of stand out to you, from an agency like that was trying to get your attention?
Like I said, I think it's really showcasing how you understand the brand, what value, an experience that you would bring that would marry well with kind of our desire to be culturally relevant in communities, driving sport. We have our sport and fashion lifestyle kind of size of the brand. So if you're really into kind of high fashion and things like that, and we have collaborations with, say, Gucci and Balenciaga, etc. So I think really, if you can showcase that your agency and your creative can marry well with perhaps our needs, then, I probably get at least 10 emails a week at minimum of new agencies asking to have conversations. It is very difficult. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that, especially because we do have so many agencies on roster right now. And, from a procurement standpoint, I don't have a budget. So it's not like I have a project in mind that I have funding to give, but I do always, I try to always at least understand what the agency can bring. I keep a little folder, so when times do come up and we're looking for new agencies, I'll go back and assess and see if something, triggers. But it can be really difficult because there's not always a need for the service that you're offering, especially when it comes to maybe asset management, or if it comes to like a content platform, or kind of dynamic content things. It really depends on the timing, to be honest, as well.
Yeah, of course. But it's good to know that the folder does exist. It's not.
It does.
It is a real thing. I've got a couple of questions here from some people in the audience. So, Oya, you asked, hi Rachel, with innovation and efficiency being a key area of focus, what are your opinions on having innovation budgets scoped outside of the core scope of work to enable sort of out-of-the-box thinking? So is there anything that exists, or?
Yeah, I mean, we have, I'm going to close the window as well. We do have kind of test and learn budgets. So we have an in-house team called Lab A, and they're looking at innovation and things. I think it depends on the company priorities at the moment. How much investment are you making in testing and learning and innovation? How does that work in terms of, like we have a very robust IT security landscape. So it depends on if it's a tech thing, how that would actually potentially integrate. But I am a strong believer in test and learn. I think we should always look at innovation new technologies emerging, new ways of doing things. So absolutely think would be great that we have these side innovation buckets while we're focused on the core scope at hand.
Yeah. Okay. Lab A. Okay, cool. Another question from Toby was, is there, and you don't have to answer this if you don't want to, but is there a particular market, culture, or community where Adidas are focusing their efforts as a growth opportunity in the UK, i.e. like paddle, which is obviously a growing sport, or the British Asian youth culture, music, anything, any particular ones you can sort of highlight?
I would love to. I really don't know, to be honest,
Okay.
and only because I sit at a global lens. I mean, of course, so my role is kind of double-hatted. I have global HQ, so we have huge global teams focused on the global content, but then I'm responsible for working with each of the countries or the regions. So a bit double-hatted, but I'm not into the specific details of the UK, unfortunately. I can tell you, at least my understanding right now is we're not so much in American football, but we, have Patrick Mahomes, who won the Super Bowl MVP. So we do kind of niche things around that, but it's more around big sporting moments that I'm aware of. But I'm sure, paddle is blowing up. So I don't know, stay tuned. We may have something coming. I'm not sure.
Get your paddle ideas. John's asked, playing devil's advocate, do agency rosters limit innovation?
I mean, I think one thing is to have a roster of core capabilities and competence that you need. But I think when it comes to innovation, though, there's not necessarily a roster for that. So if we're looking for, I don't know, virtual productions, for example, we wouldn't have necessarily someone or everyone that we would want to engage with on roster already. So we would look for bringing new partners in there. But I would say the benefit, the reason why we have rosters, clients have rosters, is because there's so much process behind onboarding an agency into, the client's culture and atmosphere. It's about setting companies up in our SAP systems to simply get them paid. It's about there's so much paperwork type things that need to be done. And if we had to reinvent that each time, it would just be too much. I mean, think about having to sign a full MSA over and over and over again by one-off projects. It's just, it wouldn't be feasible or effective. So that's why we do have contained rosters, because we have rates in place, we have contracts, we have them set up in our system. They know how to pay, they know who to contact for an invoice delay, or, all of these things. So that's why there are rosters in place, so that all of that kind of administration type work is complete.
And I don't know if this is true. Is it a myth or not that sort of things that fall below a certain budget and value don't have to go via the whole sort of procurement MSA roster? There is a certain amount where the comms and marketing teams are allowed to partner with agencies?
Yeah.
Okay, that's true. Oh, that's good to know. Paul has asked one question about, you sort of asked it before, I don't know if there's anything to add, but there is a sort of new idea initiative they've got, something very specific around a content idea that supports teens suffering from body dysmorphia, for example, like very specific. How would you suggest an agency takes a creative idea to Adidas, to you, something like that? Is there any sort of insights you could provide? I
mean, definitely would, please reach out. I'm happy to have a conversation and see, who in the organization may be already looking at something similar or something close. I mean, we do have a lot of initiatives around young women staying within sport. At a certain age, the percent of women who drop out of sport is really high, of course, compared to our male friends. So definitely, there's always opportunities. We really are focused on community, culture improvement, any of these types of things that we can, get involved in and support, as long as it makes sense in terms of what our strategy is and what we're trying to achieve. Happy to vet those ideas and have those conversations.
Yeah, and I think that it was interesting. You talked about like consumer insights and cultural relevance. I think that's obviously seems so important to Adidas, and I think if people are bringing insights to you and showing their understanding of a community, that kind of feels like where they can really add value.
Yeah.
Do you have a pay to pitch policy? I don't know if
we don't necessarily have a policy in place, and this is the conversation I was having with my teams earlier today. It is situational. It's case by case. So it depends, one, kind of on the budget, but also on how much time and effort is expected for that pitch. I am a believer that we should pay for these creative ideas, particularly if, we're asking agencies to spend weeks and hours on doing research and building 100 slide decks and all these things. Definitely should reimburse for that time. But it also, if we're just doing a small local event in France for something, I mean, I shouldn't use France because we have Olympics coming next year there, but in another, country, and it's for a 1 weekend activation on a new product release. I mean, it depends on how much investment we're asking. So there's no set policy, but it's a case by case, project by project kind of base.
Yeah. Okay. No, that makes sense. Okay. I'm also being hounded to ask you, and you don't have to answer this at all, but the amount of that threshold that doesn't go to procurement. You can say pass, but
we can have a side conversation. I don't necessarily want to disclose on video.
Yeah.
But also it's going to depend on your client. It's, of course, Adidas, we do have different thresholds for different things, but it's going to depend on that company, whether or not. So I shouldn't generically say like all companies have under X amount. But I do think a lot do. And yeah, we can have that. Feel free to email me. Or write me on LinkedIn.
Thank you, Rachel. I think that's all we've kind of got time for. I think that was really insightful and loved it. So I am just going to share a couple of other things that we've got sort of in the diary plan that's coming up. So we have our next industry interview next month with the Gate Worldwide and how they won Smarty Mobile, which is part of 3. So tune in for that on the 7th of June at 12. We've got our monthly meetup for members. So Kim French and Brad Smith are hosting the next monthly meetup for us. And we've also got a workshop we're running on the 24th of May, which is in person or online. It's about adaptive energy and why it's the latest leadership skill every sales team needs to know. So that's with Caroline Canty from Craft Coaching on the 24th of May. And lastly, we have the women's new business brunch, which is on Friday the 26th of May at the Folly in central London in the morning of the 26th. Obviously, Rachel, if you're in London, you're more than welcome. I know you're traveling over to the US soon. So let us know. But yeah, thank you for your time and everything you shared today. The recording will go to paying members online. And yeah, we'll see you all soon.
Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome. Thanks, Rachel. Loved it.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye, guys. Bye all.